Welcome to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we are broadcasting live on May 27th from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. Hurricane season officially begins next Monday, and this hour we're going to hear WMNF News' special recap of the devastating 2024 hurricane season. It's called Storm Surge. We'll hear that just after we bring you the latest news about what to expect this year. Last week, experts at the National Hurricane Center released their forecast for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. Meteorologist Megan Borowski from the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network reports they believe that the total number of storms will be above normal this year.
The National Hurricane Center has called for an above-average season, which is on par with the dialogue among the forecasting community over the past several months. We've got positive anomalies in sea surface temperatures in the main development region of the Atlantic and higher ocean heat content. Another factor at play is the neutral state of the El Niño Southern Oscillation, and this phase typically produces lesser vertical wind shear over the Atlantic compared to the El Nino phase, and lower wind shear, of course, can be conducive for storm organization. But with the science jargon aside, we've got a few things to consider here. Yes, we're looking at an above average season, but we don't know yet when storms will develop or where they will track. Those variables are predicted weeks or days in advance of impact. So the bottom line, as we all know, is that it only takes one storm to severely impact our lives and property. So while conditions are quiet, it's best to start evaluating how vulnerable you are to hazards like wind, storm surge, or freshwater flooding, and create a plan that addresses the unique needs of you and your family.
Borowski says that preparing now can prevent additional and unnecessary stress later when a storm is threatening our area. Well, we're going to spend the next half hour hearing WMNF's special presentation about the 2024 hurricane season and its aftermath. So here is our special. It's called Storm Surge. If you'd like, you can drop me an email or text and let me know your experience during the 2024 season. Our text is 813-433-0885. Let me know your name and where you experienced the hurricanes, or you can email dj@wmnf.org. Here is Storm Surge.
You're trying to get water out of your house. You're trying to file your insurance work. You're doing all of those things. But at the same time, you have really been emotionally impacted. You are feeling it.
The 2024 hurricane season in Florida is a story about anxiety and destruction, but it's also about resilience and community.
We have a great volunteers here. It's amazing how everyone's helping and stopping by for food and supplies and giving donations.
Storm surge, impacts of the 2024 hurricane season on the Tampa Bay community. Meteorologists predicted we would see an active season. 3 named storms hit Tampa Bay in 2024. In early August, Debby blasted through before it made landfall in the Big Bend area of Florida as a Category 1 hurricane. The following month, Hurricane Helene and 2 weeks later, Hurricane Milton devastated neighborhoods.
Well, this is going to be potentially a once-in-a-lifetime storm for us here in the Tampa Bay area.
Sandy beaches line the Gulf Coast of the Tampa Bay region for dozens of miles. Barrier islands run parallel to the coastline, just 3 to 5 blocks wide in some places. The islands are thin strips of sand between the Gulf of Mexico and the Florida mainland. Waves from a storm can deposit new sand or rip new channels in these impermanent islands. Over time, sand dunes accumulate along the beaches, acting as a protective barrier between the Gulf and businesses and residents. There's also a large shallow estuary, Tampa Bay. Residents and planners feared winds and water from a hurricane entering it would push seawater from the bay into communities on the shore. Some of the larger cities in the area, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, Bradenton, and Clearwater, are right next to the water. Many neighborhoods are at low elevations and prone to flooding, either after heavy rain or during very high tides. Less populated residential beachside communities like St. Pete Beach and Gulfport are packed with small independent businesses like beach bars and gift shops. Most people there live in modest single-family homes or waterfront condos. Some are longtime residents, while others are recent transplants from colder climates or snowbirds, a term locals use to describe people who come down during the winter. There's a much smaller group of residents whose lives are closely tied to the water, the live-aboard boating community. They live on small sailboats moored in Boca Ciega Bay in South Pinellas County or other somewhat sheltered bays. Nights are spent on their boats. During the day, they paddle to the shore to go to jobs, buy supplies, and shower in beachfront facilities. They're also among the most severely impacted whenever there's a storm. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration predicted 17 to 25 named storms for 2024, including 4 to 7 major hurricanes. In recent years, several hurricanes brushed the Tampa Bay area, but none of them directly struck the region. In 2022, Hurricane Ian made landfall near Fort Myers, about 126 miles south of Tampa. Ian caused devastation throughout much of the state from rainfall, winds, and storm surge, which typically causes the most damage. It occurs when hurricanes push seawater onto land. The water quickly moves into people's homes and businesses, destroying structures and sometimes drowning people who didn't evacuate. On Sunday, August 4th, Tropical Storm Debby passed well west of the Tampa Bay area, but close enough to generate ferocious conditions that it became dangerous for the live-aboard boat community in Boca Ciega Bay off Gulfport in Pinellas County. According to the Gabber newspaper, hazardous conditions made it impossible for first responders to help the residents trapped in their boats. So one boat captain rescued stranded boaters. He went ship to ship in a small inflatable craft while the waterfront streets of Gulfport flooded. Kathy Solustri is the co-owner of the Gabber.
The local boaters, whether they lived on a boat or whether they had a boat and lived on land, were really mounting this grassroots effort to find these people. And they did find some people.
Storm surge lifted several large sailboats onto the shore and became grounded, leaving one live-aboard boater missing. Brian Clow was later found drowned on his half-submerged boat.
There were more people missing at the start of the day than there were at the end. Most of them were found alive. These wonderful men and women, they didn't get to Brian in time.
Less than 2 months after Debby, the Tampa Bay area was preparing for another storm. On the morning of Thursday, September 26th, Hurricane Helene was in the Gulf of Mexico off the southwest coast of Florida, moving north and packing 100-mile-an-hour winds. The National Weather Service says winds that speed are extremely dangerous and can cause extensive damage. Near total power loss is expected because outages could last weeks. The Tampa Bay area was under hurricane, tornado, and flood watches. A storm surge of 5 to 10 feet was predicted for the coast. For context, 10 feet is higher than the bottom of most Floridians' roofs. It only takes a foot of water to sweep a vehicle away. Mandatory evacuation orders were in effect for low-lying coastal areas of Pinellas, Pasco, Hernando, and Hillsborough counties. Brian Clow's death and the harrowing experiences that the live-aboard boating community endured during Tropical Storm Debby led to people taking different approaches as Helene got closer. Some boaters remained moored in Boca Ciega Bay, but others, like Ben Monahan and Valerie Christo, decided to take the safer path and dock at the Gulfport Municipal Marina.
We're going to ride out the storm here. We want to keep the lines loose because of the surge that could potentially happen up to 8 or 9 feet. So because of that, we want to stay aboard.
The National Hurricane Center says 8 or 9 feet of storm surge is considered unsurvivable. Valerie rode out Debby in her boat. Ben tried to in his, but it was destroyed.
And after what I went through with the last storm, what we want to do is be responsible about it, keep everything okay, and make sure that Valerie, her boat is kept safe. The wind's picking up right now, as you can hear.
That's a gust.
That's a gust for sure. For sure. But as much much better here than we were out there.
Gulfport residents had concerns about the safety and choices of the live-aboard boat community as Helene approached. Karen Vanderbeek lives about 8 blocks from the water, but was not under an evacuation order.
I've lived here for 14 years, and the businesses know. The people that own these, they know what they need to do. Boat people are another story. Unfortunately, they haven't learned that part of boat life in a lot of cases. I think they're more aware this time after Tropical Storm Debby. I mean, we ended up with 20 boats wrecked, and some of them are still here, obviously. So, yeah, concerned for some of them. Hopefully they took more precautions this time.
Even before the storm arrived, a steady stream of seawater filled roads.
We've got the usual flooding going on right now. You've got a combination of the weather and a high tide that happened at like 7:07 this morning, I believe. So this isn't anything really abnormal at this point. But yeah, this is the calm before the storm.
St. Pete Beach sits on a barrier island west of St. Petersburg. It's known for its beautiful beaches with soft white sand and emerald green water. The city was under mandatory evacuation orders from Helene. As the storm approached, some streets and intersections were already impassable from the rising seawater. Roxine Riles owns Woody's waterfront on St. Pete Beach. As she closed and secured her bar, the Gulf of Mexico smashed at the seawall just a few feet from it.
We're just closing up and buttoning up now for the safety of our employees and the safety of everybody. We don't want anybody to come out because they want to see the water. We're just getting ready to get everything done now and just ride it out like we normally do. Right now the roads are underwater. The tide's high. It's going to get worse. Stay home if you're staying home. Otherwise, leave the island.
The water got higher and higher as Helene passed west of Pinellas on Thursday evening, and it kept rising as the storm headed north. The storm made landfall in Taylor County along Florida's Big Bend area as a Category 4 hurricane. The storm's strength produced catastrophic damage where it hit, leaving areas uninhabitable. Despite coming onshore about 170 miles north of Tampa, the region still felt devastation. It became clear the following morning just how badly some areas were affected. Hurricane Helene flooded tens of thousands of homes along the Gulf Coast. At least 12 Pinellas County residents died, most of them trapped in houses inundated by several feet of storm surge. Sand from beaches and dunes was pushed inland and covered streets and filled houses along the barrier islands. Matt Black owns Clearwater Pass Gym.
The community has really been coming together to get the beach back on track again, and I think everyone's going to come back better and stronger than ever before.
Black says he was relatively new to the area, but told by other locals this was the worst storm surge yet. Hurricane Helene's storm surge flooded homes with salt water from the Gulf of Mexico. Soon after the storm passed, the destroyed belongings were discarded on the curbs of thousands of homes in the Tampa Bay area. Several million cubic yards of debris lined the streets, including furniture, drywall, and boxes of ruined and waterlogged goods. Pinellas County officials called the amount of storm debris astronomically different compared to other storms. And a week after the storm, businesses in Gulfport were still cleaning up and residents gathering to share resources. Debbie Amos and her husband own the Tiki Bar and Grill. It's along the waterfront near the sand volleyball courts and the beach. The couple owns the business but leased the building. Amos says it sustained visible damage and estimates more than 4 feet of water entered the business.
The structures, are most of them anyway, are still standing, but everything on the waterfront here is completely damaged or a loss. Going in a few blocks from shore, probably up a good 4 to 5 blocks, I think, in this whole waterfront area is flooded, damaged, piles and piles of debris, and people's lives out on the curbs. And yeah, it's pretty surreal. It's what you see on TV, you know.
Helene tossed a large sailboat onto the shore across the street from the Tiki Bar. Amos says she's unsure when the bar will reopen.
just cleaning up, trying to decide what we're keeping, what we're not, what can be salvaged or not. We have a great volunteers here. It's amazing how everyone's helping and stopping by for food and supplies and giving donations. But we're just trying to get through what we should focus on, get ready for pickup, things like that.
A volunteer group delivered supplies as Amos and other people cleaned out the debris at her restaurant. The donations came from an aid distribution center at a local theater about 6 blocks inland. In the days following the storm, Gulfport became a hub of community support. Volunteers accepted donations at the theater and distributed aid packages to go out into the community. Nearby, a food truck sponsored by World Central Kitchen, a nonprofit that provides food relief to people in crisis, handed out hot meals. A floating dock was ripped out of the water and deposited in front of the Gulfport Brewery several blocks inland during the storm. It became a staging area for mutual aid activities. Allendale United Methodist Church in St. Petersburg was another mutual aid center. It sits on high ground, but it's near many of the flooded streets in the Old Northeast neighborhood. The city of St. Petersburg set up a full-service laundry facility there for residents. Hurricane Helene's widespread damages and loss left many people reeling after the storm. Organizations like the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay connected people to local resources and mental health support. CEO Clara Reynolds says many callers just focused on meeting their basic needs.
You're trying to get water out of your house. You're trying to file your insurance work. You're doing all of those things. But at the same time, you have really been emotionally impacted. You are feeling it.
Reynolds says the Crisis Center fielded 712 hurricane-related calls the weekend the storm hit. Hurricane Helene's cleanup was ongoing and stressful for the people in Tampa Bay. Less than 2 weeks after landfall, Floridians learned another storm was heading their way. Monday, October 7th, Hurricane Milton formed near Mexico. The National Hurricane Center forecast the storm could cause surge at least as severe as Helene. Models showed the forward momentum of the storm, and the winds were expected to push Gulf of Mexico water toward the shore as it approached. A Category 5 storm was barreling toward Tampa Bay. More than 9 feet of storm surge was forecast for the entire coastline of Hillsborough County and the barrier islands in Pinellas, Manatee, and Sarasota. By Tuesday, Florida Public Radio Emergency Network meteorologist Megan Borowski said Hurricane Milton had slightly weakened, but was still expected to come ashore as a major storm.
Well, this is going to be potentially a once-in-a-lifetime storm for us here in the Tampa Bay area. Messaging from the National Hurricane Center from the NWS in Tampa Bay says that this could be the most devastating storm for Tampa in the last 100 years. So very strong language coming from them. And that's because Milton this morning is a very strong Category 4 hurricane. It explosively intensified yesterday. It dropped pressure immensely, and the winds were very strong. It was a very strong Category 5 hurricane yesterday. It's weakened slightly, but it might actually intensify a little more again.
Thousands of people heeded evacuation orders as Milton approached. Highways usually packed were like a ghost town, but roads leading out of St. Petersburg were jammed up.
If you are in an evacuation zone, Pinellas, Pasco, Hillsborough County, I know all of those evacuations are already underway. I know traffic is not fun to contend with, but your life is the most important thing out there. If you are in an evacuation zone, you're told to evacuate, please do everything you can to get out. There are resources if you need assistance.
Some drivers were stuck so long on highways to evacuate, they ran out of gas. Where Hurricane Milton made landfall would make a huge difference for people in Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. Early projections had the intense storm hitting near the mouth of Tampa Bay or further north. But as it approached, its path began to wobble. Forecasters said a difference of just 20 miles north or south could have devastating consequences for people near the bay. Kathy Perkins, the Pinellas County Emergency Management Director, said if people did not heed evacuation warnings, they would likely die. Tampa Mayor Jane Castor gave similar comments on CNN. But what some called luck for Tampa, others called tragedy about 67 miles south in Siesta Key. Wednesday, October 9th, just 13 days after Helene, that's where Hurricane Milton made landfall. While the brunt of the storm hit south, Milton brought hurricane-force winds to the Tampa Bay area and hours of flooding rainfall, but significantly less storm surge than Helene.
Hurricane Milton has made landfall in Siesta Key in Sarasota County as a Category 3 storm. That means you should stay inside and stay put, get into a central area of your home, and get low as you can if you have no storm surge. Sustained winds are about 78 miles per hour and gusts of 97 were reported in Venice. The eye wall is currently hitting Tampa Bay pretty hard right now, and there are some widespread power outages.
These wind speed totals are just shocking. Venice, 97 mile per hour gusts and 78 mile per hour sustained winds. At the Egmont Channel near Egmont Key, 100 mile per hour wind gusts, 77 mile per hour sustained winds. At the Skyway Fishing Pier, 83 mile per hour gusts and 67 mile per hour sustained winds. At the Sarasota Bradenton International Airport, 73 mile per hour winds and 40 mile per hour sustained winds. These are intense winds as this storm Milton comes ashore, and it's headed for the folks inland too. This is not stopping on the coasts. It doesn't just quit. We're in for a few hours here of really intense winds, so it's important to stay alert, stay aware. There's still tornado watches and warnings across West Central Florida. It's important right now to be inside, to be in an interior room in your house.
St. Petersburg Mayor Ken Welch is at the Emergency Operations Center there.
Regardless of the exact landfall location, the Tampa Bay area will be met with major hurricane strength winds. We will be fully staffed at the EOC throughout the night. First responders are officially off the roads and will not be able to respond to emergency calls until it's safe to operate and weather conditions allow. If you have an emergency, call 911 and they will get to you as soon as it's safe to do so. Residents should also be aware that the Northeast and Southwest sewer treatment plants have been taken offline.
Milton broke a lot of records. It was one of the fastest intensifying storms in history, going from a Category 1 to 5 in 24 hours. And when it barreled into the state, Milton spawned at least 46 tornadoes, a one-day record for Florida. After the storm blew past, people who hunkered in place surveyed the damage. High winds uprooted and blew over 100-year-old oak trees, blocking roadways and crashing through roofs. Large branches littered residential front and backyards. The torrential rain washed away sand from beaches, flooded neighborhoods, and broke water pipes. Downtown St. Pete recorded 101-mile-an-hour winds. A large construction crane toppled into the corner of the office building home to the Tampa Bay Times newspaper. Winds ripped the fabric roof off of Tropicana Field, the domed baseball stadium home to the Tampa Bay Rays. Tattered fragments of the roof flapped in the breeze as they clung to the metal frame of the now open roof. More than 1 million people were without power the morning after in the Tampa Bay region, including the small city in Pinellas, Gulfport. Tom Nichols, the city's public works director, said erosion caused a water main break near Boca Ciega Bay, where water gushed up and twisted a sidewalk and road.
Well, with all the water, all the rain we had, it undermined the roadway. The roadway collapsed, and it broke the 6-inch water main down there.
Nearby, many St. Petersburg residents lost drinking water access during the storm because of a major water main break. Storm surge inundated some of the city's sewer treatment plants as well, knocking them offline. Drinking water was restored to most people in St. Pete rather quickly, but in Gulfport, a boil water notice stayed in effect for a week. Parts of Gulfport Beach eroded during the storm, including the sand volleyball courts by the Tiki Bar and Grill. That's where Helene damaged the area just 2 weeks before.
It was the same thing, all the rain that we had, and then when the water went back out, it just undermined all the sand and took it back out to sea. So we got quite a bit of sand that we're missing, and erosion underneath the walkways and the casino pad.
Nichols said there were a lot of trees down across the city.
A lot of power lines down. People should stay out of the area as everybody's messaging out. We got crews coming in. We have National Guard coming in to help us start clearing.
Homes, stores, businesses, and streetlights were dark from blown down power lines. The Florida National Guard was among groups taking an important first step in allowing people safe access back to their communities. They cleared trees, downed power lines, and other debris. Gasoline for cars or home generators became difficult to find after the storm. Many stations ran out of fuel, but without electricity, even the gas stations with fuel could not pump it, and some turned to portable generators. Dozens of cars waiting in line to tap gas from a single working pump was a common sight. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced the state would set up fuel distribution areas where people could get a maximum of 10 gallons per car. A few days after the storm, St. Pete resident Stacy waited 2.5 hours in a line of cars at a fuel distribution site across from the now roofless Tropicana field.
I unfortunately didn't go out and get some thinking I had enough. I had enough for 3 days thinking, and then last night I looked at the generator and it's empty. So I got up this morning and got over here and hopefully,
The rain caused local rivers to swell. A number of rivers overflowed their banks, or threatened to, for several days after the hurricane. Mark Fulkerson is the chief professional engineer with the Southwest Florida Water Management District.
We are seeing flooding occur in areas that aren't mapped for it, just because of the amount of historic rainfall that we got with this storm and how wet things were prior. Some of the rivers, over the next several days, we're going to see those water levels dropping. And, it may take a week or more, 2 weeks, before they're back below flood levels.
As the rainwater moved downstream and into channels and rivers, some neighborhoods saw flooding on a different timeline than others.
But so many of these other areas back in the neighborhoods where maybe a river came out of its banks and flooded into a neighborhood, and then the river's receded, but that water level in that neighborhood has no way to get out now. So it may sit there for quite a while, could be several weeks.
Debris wasn't the only danger lurking in the floodwaters. An unusually high number of potentially fatal flesh-eating bacteria cases were reported after the storm. The bacteria emerge in the Gulf in the summer and coincide with storm cleanup and hurricane season. Florida Department of Health Public Information Officer Tom Iovino said the bacteria bring heavy risk.
It's an infection, so you see the typical redness, swelling, discharge, but then it could become ulcerated and it can become very dangerous after that.
The state health department reported 13 cases in Pinellas County through mid-October. The hurricanes reshaped parts of the shoreline. Storms leveled sand dunes, eroded or added to beaches, and created water passes where there used to be land. The United States Geological Survey blamed the heaviest erosion on Hurricane Helene. Kara Doran is a scientist at the USGS in St. Petersburg. She says sand dunes are essential in preventing beach erosion and are a crucial component in protecting communities from high storm surge. They are the first line of defense in protecting homes, roads, and other infrastructure from high water.
Areas with nice, high, wide sand dunes are protected from a lot of the effects of the storm, because as those water levels rise and the large waves come in, they're going to impact the dune first, and the dune can absorb a lot of that wave energy.
Dunes provide protection and allow for beach renourishment to occur at a faster rate. Doran says it would take nature years to a decade to return beaches and dunes to their previous states unless people intervene to replenish sand.
Communities don't want to wait that long for that process to take place, and so working with human intervention and engineering can bring that sand back to the beach, can rebuild the dunes.
After Helene, a lot of the sand from dunes was washed into streets and homes or carried back out to sea. Things slowly returned to normal in the months after back-to-back storms, and while recovery was still happening, most beaches were again open to the public. Many of the boats that littered the shorelines had been removed by salvage crews, and the live-aboard boating community was, for the most part, back to the routines of spending nights aboard and the days on shore. Debris cleanup was coming to an end. Giant piles of tree limbs and mountains of flooded belongings had been mostly cleared away from the streets. Manatee County cleared more than 2 million cubic yards of debris from the 3 hurricanes. Pinellas County cleared more than 650,000 cubic yards, and the city of Tampa collected 1.3 million cubic yards of hurricane debris. In beach communities, sand was cleared from the roadways and homes. Pinellas County was moving clean sand that piled into streets and into homes back onto the beaches. The National Guard began hauling accumulated sand piles at beach access parks along Gulf Boulevard to assess the sand to see if it could be reused. A similar project was happening in Manatee County, where Brad Zink is the emergency management coordinator.
We're using a 3/8-inch diamond-shaped screen through our screeners to get out any type of material, even the shell, the rocks, and everything, so that when it goes back on the beach, it's pretty much like a crystal type of white sand that everybody has been known to enjoy and stuff with their families.
The program allowed Manatee County to keep tons of sand on its beaches.
We didn't want to bring in sand from other parts of the county or parts of the state even, not knowing the origin of it, not knowing, even if the sifting part would even work for that and make it the crystal clear like our sand is. So we wanted to keep it in the natural habitat that it is, and that's just basically putting it back on after we clean it.
The sand that wasn't fit for beaches, like sand collected from parking lots, commercial lots, and residences, typically with larger debris, was dedicated for roads and capital projects. The county said that will contribute to significant savings.
It's hard to put words out there because of how much devastation there was, and then to look at what we've done and where we're at now, it's huge. It's huge.
To aid in the healing process after the storms, local artist Yala Ford invited school children and community leaders to put their handprints on a new mural.
I think it's been scary. I think it's been overwhelming. I think that it's also been more traumatic to put together because I think there was much more damage than any of us really realized. But I think that's what makes us so much stronger. I think that we can now see a brighter future. I think that we can also, on top of seeing a brighter future, be able to connect different dots. We're able to really, I think, come together in this moment and heal together.
LaFord's All Hands United mural is outside the Museum of Fine Arts along the downtown St. Petersburg waterfront. She says it symbolizes resilience, unity, and strength, and ties people together as the community heals.
You see that our streets are now cleared. We see that, I think just as you have waves that rise, they fall, and then we reassess, and we come up with different clever ways to, I think, improve humanity. I think that, it's all about rebuilding. I think it's a refreshed viewpoint and a renewal, and one that we can actually find bright lights. And I think that, I look for moments where these kids that are at Mount Zion, we're bringing 100 of those kids to put their hands in the formation and movement of the ocean and find that those silver linings of the community leaders that we're now leaning on to make sure that we're making good decisions forward in order to make sure that in history, 100 years from now, we can see such a beautiful space that we rebuilt.
Scientific organizations like NASA say global climate change, fueled by human-caused changes to the atmosphere, will likely create more intense hurricanes and cause a higher risk of flooding to coastal communities from increased storm surge. Climate change will lead to more severe weather events with heavier rainfall, rapid intensification of storms, and more Category 4 and 5 hurricanes. Storm surge, impacts of the 2024 hurricane season on the Tampa Bay community. Written, produced, and narrated by Sean Canan at the studios of WMNF Tampa. Thanks to the WMNF News team, including Randy Zimmerman, Megan Bowman, Chris Young, Lisa Marzilli, Ben Montgomery, Leah Burdick, Leah Marcy, and Ernesto Radich, and the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network. Public domain music by the Maravines. Copyright 2024 by WMNF, WMNF.org. Well, that was our presentation of Storm Surge, our information about the 2024 hurricane season and its aftermath. If you have a DJ at WMNF.org, or you can text 813-433-0885 if you have anything to say about storm surge. You can also share it with a friend. It's on our website, WMNF.org. We turn now to a couple of higher education stories in Florida. In just a bit, we're going to hear about New College of Florida's alternative graduation. But first, let's go up to Tallahassee and listen to a story about the uproar at Florida A&M University over its new president-elect. It's lobbyist Marva Johnson, and uproar is growing. Supporters of the storied, historically black college or university see it as a hostile takeover from an administration that's focused on eliminating anything that's perceived as inclusive or woke. So here is a report about this controversy from our partners at WFSU. Margie Benzel reports that those supporters say the battle to preserve black culture and history extends beyond the nation's top-ranked public historically black university.
Johnson is a lobbyist for Charter Communications, one of the largest cable companies in the U.S. She has 3 degrees, including her Juris Doctorate, and she served 2 terms on Florida's Public Education Governing Board. She has ties to Governor Ron DeSantis, who has made it a mission to crack down on schools he's deemed woke. And he's actively worked to install presidents at the state's public universities who share his worldview.
This may have started with a black college in Florida, but best believe it will not end there. So the fight that we take up in this moment is for FAMU, but it's not just for FAMU. It's for all of Black America.
Kenesha Grant is a FAMU alumna, media contributor, and political science professor at Howard, a fellow HBCU. She spoke on Wednesday's Zoom call, organized by a group called Keepers of the Flame. Grant views Johnson's appointment to FAMU's presidency as a continuation of a cultural war, which has led to rollbacks on affirmative action and equal opportunity, and to the culling of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives across the United States.
They are working to hollow out the engine of the black middle class in Florida because they know education is the great equalizer. They want us to be the followers and not the leaders. They want us to be the workers and not the boss.
The fight over FAMU is also echoing in Congress, where Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries was recently asked whether Johnson's appointment was connected to Project 2025, the conservative plan to rescind diversity, equity, and inclusion.
We are not going to allow the Trump administration to take over historically black colleges and universities across the country, to whitewash our history, and to try to indoctrinate the young people of America with their extreme and failing ideology.
Johnson was a last-minute addition to the presidential finalist list. The governor directly and indirectly appoints nearly all of members of public education boards. While she was still a candidate on campus for the day, Johnson's meeting with the alumni and wider community didn't go well. Among those questioning Johnson was Clinton Byrd, a 1971 FAMU graduate in accounting.
Do you feel that in this climate, under these circumstances, that you, in being supportive of Governor DeSantis, could actually protect FAMU?
If the general public perception is that Governor DeSantis likes me, then wouldn't it stand to reason that that he wants me to be successful? Yeah.
On the day of the trustees' vote, they first approved a significant increase in the potential salary the president would receive, up to $750,000. As it turned out, that was the amount Johnson had requested, a figure beyond what FAMU has historically been capable of funding. In Florida, salaries above $250,000 must be funded by the school itself. Kristen Harper, chair of the Board of Trustees and a former FAMU student government president, was troubled by that.
As a fiduciary, I don't think it's financially responsible to select a finalist
whose qualifications pale in comparison to others, and whose salary requirements we cannot afford. I want to go on the record to reflect the hypocrisy.
At a time when government leaders are insisting that people be hired based on merit and experience and not the color of their skin, Harper notes, Johnson doesn't make the grade.
In an age of merit-based hiring decisions, how can one justify settling for a candidate who does not meet all of the position criteria, or turning a blind eye to exceptionally qualified candidates?
The opposition is deep. A Change.org petition opposing Johnson has reached nearly 18,000 signatures. Alumni are threatening to boycott the school. Other HBCUs are looking on with fear and worry, concerned about their own futures at a time of widespread concerns about the future of free speech and civil rights. I'm Margie Menzel.
Well, I want to thank WFSU in Tallahassee for that report out of FAMU. And now let's move to Sarasota for another higher education story. This one comes from our partners at WSLR Low Power FM Community Radio in Sarasota. On Friday was the official graduation at New College, but the night before that, it was alternative graduation for New College students. It's the third of those since the governor's takeover of the campus in Sarasota 2 years ago. This off-campus event was probably the last one that had a graduating class whose majority still remembers the pre-takeover college. Here's a story from WSLR News intern Farah Velasilo, who herself is a New College student. She was there to soak up the atmosphere. Here's her story.
Safari Svensson.
Bo Dillon.
The walk of the graduation ceremony had the old New College feel. No pomp and circumstance. It featured a student in a medieval dress, a bathrobe, a guy in flip-flops and shorts, and a manga-style character. It featured emotional support dogs, even a student in full regalia, waving an oversized New College flag. Seats were hard to come by, an estimated 300 to 400 packed into Holly Hall, the Sarasota Orchestra venue. The contrast to the official ceremony, which went down 24 hours later on the Bayfront lawn at the College Hall, is obvious and intentional. First and foremost, at the all graduation, the students are more than just involved. The alumni of the Novo Collegiate Association, who funded this year's event to the tune of $20,000, put students in charge to give them the graduation they deserve. 3 students emceed the event, 2 of them wearing Palestinian keffiyehs. It featured 2 retiring professors. Also speaking was Amy Reed, the French professor, gender studies chair, and hard-hitting faculty trustee who now works for PEN America. Reed gave shout-outs to the 4 students who graduated with a degree in gender studies despite the obstacles thrown their way. Then there was the contrast in keynote speakers. For the official ceremony, the college administration picked Alan Dershowitz, the controversial legal scholar and defender of Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and Harvey Weinstein. According to the Herald Tribune, the college pays Dershowitz $25,000. For the all-graduation, the students picked Viet Thanh Nguyen. He is the author of The Sympathizer, a Pulitzer-winning novel that was turned into an HBO series. Nguyen, whose family came as a refugee from Vietnam, talked about the contributions of immigrants to America. He highlighted the need for students to find their voice.
I was an English major and an ethnic studies major. People would always ask, what are you going to do with an English major or an ethnic studies major? None of the answers I gave likely satisfied anybody. Reading, writing, teaching, the acts of the humanities might have all seemed rather modest to people only interested in making money. Yet the humanities have always mattered, now more than ever for many reasons. But the one I'm focusing on tonight is about finding your voice.
A new college student who is graduating with a degree in computer science had a strong message for his peers. Safari Swanson not only caught the attention with their outfit, Joker-style face paint, a bathrobe, showing off their chest, tattoos, and six-pack.
I was working 60-hour weeks in a dingy Brooklyn kitchen, barely scraping by under the poverty line. A series of tragic health issues cost me my job and soon after my apartment. And there I was at 19 years old. I had no home, no money, and seemingly no future. I found myself living unhoused, jumping between friends' couches, and even sleeping in a tent in the woods. All the while battling Lyme's disease, mono, and kidney stones at the same time. Trifecta I would not recommend anyone trying in the audience. So let's just say college wasn't really on the table for me or in my mind. In fact, the idea of attending university at all felt like a dream that people of my background just would never even have the opportunity to pursue. Yet standing here today on this stage, I almost have to pinch myself that what used to be such a distant dream has now become my reality. And while my personal struggles may seem a little tough to some, I can assure you that my story is anything but unique. Getting to know all the wonderful people in my class these past 3 years, I've learned at least one thing, that every single person graduating today in this crowd has their own story.
Safari said they were always different, and the world made them feel it, trying to force them into a box. They ended with a call to push back.
But while those people live in fear and insecurity, your divergence, your difference, every little single thing that makes you unique has helped you become quite the opposite of those people. Because every day that you deny the status quo and what others seek to make you, you become that much stronger, that much more fearless, and that much more resilient. Because let me tell you, no great leader was ever made, no world-changing innovation discovered, no grand achievement ever met by staying in your lane, trying to fit in, and being like everybody else. And you know, the class of 2025 hasn't just had to meet the challenges of a prestigious and rigorous honors degree program, but simultaneously hurdle a consistent plight of new challenges since the sweeping changes made 3 years ago. People have tried to get rid of your major, make you feel uncomfortable, make you feel unsafe, to do anything to stop you from walking across this stage tonight. And struggle is quite an understatement, isn't it? For so many, the past few years have been painful, depressing, demoralizing, and maybe even hopeless. But against all odds, you did it. You have defied all expectations, accomplished what so many have tried to bar you from. You didn't just survive, but you thrived. And no other degree program in this country can provide the unique and powerful kind of resilience this has all earned you. They told us to be silent, and we got louder. They told us to stay in line, and we got bolder. They told us to shrink back down, and we just stood up taller. Because the class of 2025 didn't bend under pressure. No, we became unbreakable.
Reporting from WSLR News, this is Farah Balacillo.
Well, thanks to Farah and to WSLR, the community radio station in Sarasota, for that report from the alternative graduation for New College students. It was good to hear that. And Bubba writes in and says, thanks so much for playing the alternative graduation ceremony clips from New College of Florida. He says he watched it live on Thursday, so thanks for that input. And speaking of New College, that school, as you heard, underwent a political takeover by Governor DeSantis a couple of years ago, and it continues to make headlines for several controversies this month. Here's a story that WMNF's Chris Young put together that reports about one alumni group we heard about in that report that says the school's reputation is being destroyed.
4 alumni have threatened to sue New College administration, saying the administration misused donor funds. Meanwhile, the school's former communications director is facing new felony charges for indecent exposure, and new documents have come to light about backdoor talks to give USF's Sarasota Manatee campus to New College. William Rosenberg is the president of the Novo Collegiate Alliance and an alumnus of New College.
Am I surprised? No. Am I absolutely appalled? Yes.
The organization was formed in February of 2023 after the school's conservative takeover led by Governor DeSantis. Rosenberg says his own questions have gone unanswered regarding an endowment fund that he set up while on the school's official alumni association, but also says he remains hopeful that New College will eventually emerge stronger.
We're hoping that folks that come in the future will understand what was mismanaged away and what was lost in the ideological and culture wars battles, and hopefully begin to rebuild just a little bit going forward.
Chris Young, WMNF News.
Well, thanks to WMNF's Chris Young for that report about New College of Florida. You can email or text if you have anything to say about those stories. The last story I want to leave you with in this program before we go to the NPR News headlines at the top of the hour is about Florida topping the list yet again for most hate groups. Here's a story from Central Florida Public Media's Danielle Pryor.
According to the Year in Hate and Extremism report that looked at hate targeting minorities and the government across the U.S. in 2024, hate crimes are down. But Southern Poverty Law Center's Rachel Carroll Rivas, who helped compile the report, says Florida still leads the nation in hate groups.
What does this mean in the South? In Alabama, 25 organizations. Georgia, 50. Louisiana, 11. And Mississippi, 7. But Florida, 100 hate and anti-government organizations, the highest total in our country.
Carol Rivas says the spread of false claims of white genocide online, fueled by the, quote, white replacement theory, has led to the rise in these groups across the state and country. In Orlando, I'm Danielle Pryor.
Well, thanks for that report out of the Orlando area about hate groups in the state of Florida and how Florida, yet again, is leading the nation in hate groups. And we're going to go to the top of the hour right now, and I want to read this story that you heard a little bit about at the top of last hour, and maybe they'll mention it in the NPR News headlines, but I think it's interesting that National Public Radio, NPR, and 3 of its local stations in Colorado have filed a lawsuit today against President Trump. I'm reading here from the AP. They're arguing that an executive order aimed at cutting federal funding for that organization is illegal. The lawsuit, which was filed in federal court in Washington by NPR, Colorado Public Radio, Aspen Public Radio, and KUTE Incorporated, argues that Trump's executive order to slash public subsidies to PBS and NPR violates the First Amendment. Trump issued the executive order earlier this month that instructs the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and other federal agencies to cease federal funding for NPR and PBS and requires that they work to root out indirect sources of public financing for the news organizations. Trump issued the order after alleging that there's bias in the broadcasters' reporting. I'm going to interject this story right now to tell you something you probably already know, but WMNF is a member station of NPR. And the order's objectives could not be clearer, says the lawyers. They say the order aims to punish NPR for the content of news and other programming the president dislikes and chill the free exercise of First Amendment rights by NPR and individual public radio stations across the country. That's according to the lawsuit. It continues that the order is textbook retaliation and viewpoint-based discrimination in violation of the First Amendment. and it goes on from there. But I want to thank everybody for listening to WMNF Tampa. This has been Tuesday Cafe, coming to you live from the studios of WMNF Tampa. Our fund drive begins tomorrow. If you support public radio and WMNF, please make a donation at WMNF.org. This is Tuesday Cafe. Coming up next is an interview with Vijay Prashad about Is the Nakba Permanent? This is WMNF Tampa. Thanks so much for listening.